The wind screamed like it was dying. Mara Quinn stood at the doorway of the cabin with the last of her husband's flannel wrapped tight around her. Her fingers, cracked and stiff from cold, gripped the splintered edge of the frame. Outside, snow fell sideways, white, blinding, and endless. Inside, her children slept curled together under the quilt she'd stitched from the shirts Thomas wore before the mine took him. She watched the storm and whispered through chapped lips, "We don't have another night." There was no more wood, no more oats. The last match had been used that morning to coax life into the stovetop so she could boil a handful of water into something resembling breakfast. A few mouthfuls of heat, then nothing. Nothing but the sound of the wind howling like it wanted inside. Behind her, Nell let out a soft cough in her sleep, the dry rasp of it pulling tears she couldn't afford to cry. Mara turned from the door. She moved across the cabin with the weight of someone walking through water. Every step heavy, every thought heavier. She sat down beside the children and gently tucked the quilt closer around them. Evan stirred but didn't wake. His cheeks were sunken. His ribs showed when he coughed. 9 years old, and the world had already taken too much from him. Mara pressed a hand to his forehead. Still warm. That meant something. She hoped. Nell, 6 and quiet since Thomas's funeral, had taken to whispering to the corners of the room, as if her father might still be there hiding between the logs or crouched in the chimney smoke. Mara leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She imagined warmth. Not comfort, she'd long stopped dreaming of that, but safety. A stove burning steady, bread in the oven, a door that shut out the cold. Then she opened her eyes. Hope is dangerous. Hope kills slower than cold, but it always finishes the job. She stood, crossed the cabin, and reached for the coat that had once been Thomas's. Too big for her. Too thin for this storm. Still, it was all she had. She pulled it on, grabbed the scarf she'd knitted for Nell last year, and wrapped it around her own face. Time to go. She moved back to the children, shaking them gently. Evan. Nell. Wake up, babies. We're walking to town. Nell's eyes opened first. Pale blue. Too big for her face. It's still snowing. I know, sweetheart. But we can't wait. Why can't we wait? Evan asked, already sitting up, already coughing. Mara couldn't tell him the truth. That waiting meant dying. That staying here meant she'd have to bury them with her bare hands before laying down beside them. She smiled instead. Because Sister Ruth always makes stew on Thursdays. It was a Tuesday. They dressed in silence. Layers over layers, socks over mittens, scarves over faces. No boots thick enough, no clothes dry enough. Just willpower and a direction. Mara tied the last button on Nell's coat 2 sizes too big, but she'd cinched it with twine. She knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. You hold my hand. You don't let go, no matter what. Nell nodded. She turned to Evan. Same for you. You're the strong one, remember, I'm not strong, he mumbled. You're mine. That's enough. She opened the cabin door. Wind punched them square in the chest. The sky wasn't sky anymore. It was just white. Blinding, flat white, pressing down from above and clawing up from below. Stay close, she shouted, one behind the other. They stepped into the storm. The path was already gone. The fence posts buried. The trees no longer trees, just ghosts leaning in the wind. Mara went first, feet plunging into snow up to her knees. Evan gripped the back of her coat. Nell clung to her brother. Step by step, breath by breath. She whispered a rhythm to herself, a silent chant between crunches of snow. One more step, one more breath, one more step. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Mara couldn't feel her legs. Her lips had gone numb. Ma Evan said, voice ragged, "I can't see the creek." "It's okay," she lied. "We're close." She wasn't sure they were even going the right direction. Another step, another breath. Then Evan's grip slipped. Mara turned. He was down, collapsed into the snow, eyes half shut. Evan, she dropped to her knees, pulled him up. He swayed, limp, breathing in rattles. "I'm just tired," he whispered. "I just need a minute." "No minutes," Mara said, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You hear me? No minutes." She tried to lift him, but her arms were shaking too hard. "Please," she begged. "Please don't do this." Nell started to cry, soft at first, then louder. "Somebody." Mara sobbed. "Please." No one answered but the wind. Then a sound. Low, heavy, rhythmic. Not wind, not animal. Hoofbeats. Mara turned her head toward the sound. Out of the white blur came a shape tall, dark, and solid. A rider. On horseback. A pack trailing behind. He pulled the reins. The horse snorted steam into the cold. She saw a man beneath the wide-brimmed hat. Bearded, weathered, dressed in hides. Eyes hidden under a fur hood. He didn't speak, just looked at her. Then the children. Then back. Mara's voice cracked. "Please." Still, he said nothing. Then he dismounted, stomped through the snow, and without asking, lifted Evan into his arms like he weighed nothing. "Cabin's close," he said, voice like gravel under snow. "Move." Mara blinked. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He just turned, leading the horse and children into the white, expecting her to follow. She did. Because hope might be a lie. But when a man walks out of a blizzard and carries your dying son without asking for a name, you follow. Snow followed them like a second shadow. Mara could barely keep her eyes open as she stumbled behind the man through the storm. The wind screamed around her, lifting her coat and biting at the skin beneath. Her hands were clenched into fists inside her threadbare gloves, her breath coming in ragged gasps behind the scarf wrapped tight across her mouth. The stranger walked ahead, holding the reins of a massive roan gelding that cut through the snow like it had walked through worse. On the horse's back, Evan lay slumped against the saddle horn, Nell pressed tightly against him, arms around his waist. The man's coat was thick buckskin stitched and patched with the kind of wear you only got from years in the wild. A rifle rested against the saddle. A pack sled dragged behind them, half buried under canvas and snow. Mara couldn't see his face beneath the fur-lined hood. She didn't even know his name. They crested a low ridge barely visible through the white. That's when she saw it, a cabin. Low to the ground. Smoke barely curling from the crooked chimney. The kind of place built not to be seen. The man stopped, tied off the horse to a half-buried post, and lifted Evan down with practiced ease. Nell slid off after him, feet wobbling in the deep snow. "In," he said. Mara hesitated, then stumbled toward the cabin legs nearly folding underneath her. The man opened the door with one shoulder, nodding for her to go inside. The warmth hit her like a fist. It wasn't much a single-room trapper's shack, with a stone hearth, 2 crude bunks, and shelves filled with pelts, tins, and hanging herbs. But the fire was real, and the air inside wasn't trying to kill her. The man moved quickly, setting Evan on one bunk, stripping off the wet coat, wrapping him in thick wool blankets. Nell stood near the fire, shaking but quiet. Mara hovered still, breathless, still not believing they were inside alive. Her knees gave out, and she slid to the floor near the fire. The man crouched, feeding another log into the flame. Orange light flickered across his face. Weathered, strong jaw, eyes dark as winter mud, unreadable. He didn't look at her when he said, "You walked them into a blizzard. Were you trying to die?" Mara flinched. "I was trying to save them." He gave her a hard glance. "That how you figure it?" "We were headed to Silver Hollow. There's a mission. Sister Ruth takes in children." Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe they had a chance there. Better than starving in that cabin. Better than watching me fail them." He sat back on his heels. "You'd rather hand them to strangers than let them die with you." Mara's throat tightened. "Better they forget me alive than remember me dead." He watched her for a long beat, then stood walking to the shelves. He pulled down a tin, tossed it to her. "Dried venison. Get some in 'em." She caught it with numb fingers. "Thank you. I ain't doing it for you." He turned away, then paused. "They got names," she nodded. "Evan and Nell. I'm Mara Quinn." He said nothing. After a moment, she asked, "And you?" He didn't turn around. He busied himself with unbuckling the saddlebags, sorting through gear. "I asked your name." He finally looked at her. "Names are for men who need remembering. I'm not one of them." The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was thick, heavy, like the kind of silence you hold when someone's past is too sharp to speak of. "You have somewhere to go?" she asked, voice quieter now. "Nowhere worth mentioning." He set a kettle over the fire. Steam began to curl into the air. "I should have died out there," Mara said, eyes on the flames. "We all should have. You could have kept riding." He glanced at the children. "Didn't want to see more bodies in the snow." "You're a good man," she whispered. He shook his head. "I'm not. But I know the cold, and I know what it does to a mother trying to do right." Mara looked down, shame biting deeper than the frostbite ever could. "Do you have children? I had a daughter." His voice was flat. "She didn't make it through a bad winter." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "Wasn't your fault." Nell, wrapped in a blanket, now shuffled over to Mara and leaned into her lap. Mara stroked her hair, watching the man pour hot water into a tin cup and hand it to Evan. "You're not from around here," she said. "No one is if you go far enough into the hills." She wanted to press, wanted to know why he lived in a trapper's shack halfway to nowhere, why he didn't flinch at snow or ghosts. But the look on his face, stone hard and far away, told her now wasn't the time. The hours passed in firelight. Evan ate. Nell fell asleep against Mara's shoulder, and slowly her fingers started to feel like hers again. The man stood, walked to the door, and opened it just wide enough to check outside. Snow still fell, but the wind had died some. "We'll stay here tonight," he said. "Storm's not done." "Then what?" Mara asked. He stared out into the darkness. "Depends what you're planning." "I don't know anymore." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Behind him the fire popped. Then he added without looking at her, "There's a ranch south of here. Blackwill. Run by a hard woman. She don't give handouts, but she pays fair if you work." Mara blinked. "You think she'd take us? She's taken worse. You know her. I've been paid by her once or twice. She doesn't like questions, doesn't like charity. But she likes quiet workers who don't break." Mara looked at her sleeping children. the rising warmth in their cheeks, the steady rhythm of their breathing. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "I'll clean, I'll scrub, I'll cut wood with my teeth if I have to. Just, I can't watch them fade again." The man gave a short nod. "Then we'll ride at first light." She stared at him. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. He didn't answer for a long moment. "Then, 'cause no one helped me. Not when it mattered. And some debts you can't pay with coin." He stepped away from the firelight into the corner where shadows swallowed him whole. He didn't remove his coat, didn't lay down, just sat with his back to the wall, a knife balanced loosely in one gloved hand, as if sleep was something he didn't trust anymore. Mara sat beside her children, watching the fire settle to coals. Outside, the wind softened like a breath finally let go. At first light, the wind was still, but the cold hadn't loosened its grip. Ice clung to the windows of the cabin, forming thin webs across the glass like a warning. The fire had died to a whispering ember, and the only sound was the soft breathing of the children curled together beneath the heavy blankets. Mara stirred, her back aching from the wooden floor, and her muscles tight from the day before. She blinked toward the door, expecting to see the mountain man still perched in his corner, half awake with that knife in hand. But he wasn't there. She sat up fast. Then a voice, gruff, low, calm, just stepped outside to check the sky. She turned toward the open door. He stood at the edge of the porch, the fur of his hood ruffled by the breeze. The horse snorted behind him, stomping in the snow. The sky was a gray so pale it was almost white, and for the first time in days, the clouds weren't breaking apart, just hanging still like they were waiting. He came back inside and shut the door gently. "We'll head south in a bit," he said. "Snow's still thick, but it's passable." Mara nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around Nell. "Thank you for everything." He shrugged it off, brushing frost from his shoulders. "I said I'd get you out." "I aim to." Before she could speak again, there was a sound. Not the wind. Not the horse. A knock. 3 firm raps on the wooden door. The man went still. His hand slid to the knife on his belt. The knock came again. He moved slow, silent. Cracked the door 2 inches. A voice called from outside. "That how you greet your oldest friend, Ren?" The man exhaled. Tension eased from his shoulders. He opened the door fully. Jonas 2 Moons stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He was tall, dark-haired, and dressed in a mix of settler and Ute clothing, buckskin pants, a wool vest over a faded cavalry shirt, a red bandana at his neck. A small pouch of herbs hung from his hip, and a bone-handled knife gleamed at his belt. His eyes moved across the room, landing first on the children, then on Mara. "You picked up strays again," he said, nodding toward Ren. "She's not a stray," Ren said. "She's a mother." Jonas gave a low whistle. "Haven't seen you take anyone in since." He trailed off, and the room dipped into silence for a beat too long. Then he shifted gears. "I was headed through the pass. Figured I'd stop here, see if your bones froze over yet. Lucky I did." Mara sat up straighter. "Who are you?" "Name's Jonas 2 Moons. I used to ride with this quiet bastard when he still answered to Isaac Fletcher, before he started pretending he didn't exist." Ren didn't respond. He just walked past and began strapping gear to the pack sled. Jonas walked over, crouched by the fire. "You folks headed somewhere?" "There's a ranch," Mara said. "He told me about it." "Blackwill." Jonas nodded. "That old woman's still running it. You know her, worked her land once, long time ago. She's got the spine of a tree root and a heart like hard leather, but she keeps her people fed." He looked to Wren. You think she'll take them? She might, Wren said, not looking up. If they work hard and keep quiet. Jonas nodded slowly. Then his tone changed. You know what happened at the hollow? Wren's hands stopped moving. No. Jonas met Mara's eyes. The mission. Sister Ruth's place. It was raided 4 nights back. 3 children gone. Ruth got beat up bad. Says a group of men came in like they knew exactly what they were after. Mara's stomach dropped. Gone. They were taken. Jonas nodded grimly. No bodies, no ransom, just gone. Word is some folks from south of the ridge are paying for kids. Don't ask what for. Mara pulled Nell tighter against her side, heart pounding. I was going to take them there, she whispered. If that storm hadn't hit, you'd have walked them straight into it, Wren said flatly. Jonas turned to him. That's not what she needs to hear. It's the truth. Wren stood up, slinging his rifle across his back. You hear any names, anything about who's behind it? Jonas shook his head. Only that they're riding under no flag and traveling light. They don't linger. Just take and move. Wren nodded slowly, jaw tight. Where do you think they'll head next? Mara asked. If they're smart, south. Warmer towns, fewer questions. Jonas looked at the children again. But if they're still hungry, they'll circle back. Wren crossed to the door. Then we ride now. Mara stood too. Wait, what if they're near? They won't be this far, Wren said. Not without leaving tracks. And they don't like snow any more than we do. But what if they find us on the way? Jonas looked between them, then to Wren. You really planning on taking them through canyon country alone? They've made it this far. You've been lucky, that's different. Wren looked over his shoulder at Mara, and for a moment something passed in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, responsibility. I'm not leaving them behind, he said. We move fast, we move quiet. Jonas sighed. Then I'm coming too. Wren blinked. You don't have to, I know. But sometimes your only choices are wrong and worse. Wren studied him a long beat, then nodded. Jonas clapped him on the shoulder, then crouched to speak to Evan. You ever ridden beside a man who can smell wolves from a mile out? He asked with a wink. Evan shook his head. Well, you're about to. Don't worry. I don't bite. Evan grinned faintly, the first in days. They packed fast. Blankets, dried meat, ammunition. Jonas strapped a second rifle to the horse. Wren fixed the sled. Mara tightened Nell's scarf, then wrapped her own coat over Evan's shoulders. Her hands trembled, but not from cold this time. As she stepped out into the snow again, following these 2 strangers, one a man who'd left his name behind the other, straddling 2 cultures, she realized something terrifying. She was trusting them, and worse, she wanted to. The horse trudged forward. The sun cracked faint over the ridge. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. Snow had stopped falling, but the cold remained pressed into every crease of the land like a second skin. The sky had turned a flat, endless gray, stretching above the pine-studded ridges like a sheet of iron. The sled creaked over hard snow as they moved south. Wren and Jonas walking in silence, Mara riding with the children on the gelding. Every few minutes, Jonas's eyes scanned the trees, and every once in a while Wren would stop to listen, his head tilted slightly, like he could hear something no one else could. The path was narrow. It wasn't a road, just an old Ute trail Jonas remembered from years ago, half forgotten by settlers and untouched by wagons. It wound around frozen creeks, through dense aspen groves, and up low ridgelines where the wind could see you. Are we close? Mara asked, her voice rough from disuse. Wren didn't look back. Half a day if the pass is clear. And if it's not, we make camp. Jonas turned slightly in the saddle. Blackwill sits in a shallow valley. Not much around except stone fences and silence. You'll feel it before you see it. Evan coughed behind her, and Mara tightened her arms around him. The silence stretched again. Hours passed like that, hooves crunching, sled, creaking boots, breaking crusted snow. The stillness of the forest felt wrong. Not peaceful. Expectant. They stopped near midday. Wren raised a gloved hand and crouched near a patch of disturbed snow. Tracks, he muttered. Jonas slid down from his saddle, frowning. Elk too wide, too heavy. Wagon, maybe, but only one set in, none out. Could be nothing, Jonas said, but his hand drifted to the rifle on his back. Wren didn't respond. He stood and kept walking. Mara leaned toward Jonas. What is it? He glanced at her. A man who spends most of his life in the wild doesn't believe in coincidence. If Wren's quiet, he's thinking too loud to talk. She looked ahead, watching Wren disappear into the trees without hesitation. Has he always been like this? She asked softly. Jonas considered. No. He used to laugh. Used to talk so much I wanted to knock his teeth out. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. That was before his wife died. And before the army turned him into a ghost. Mara blinked. I thought he lost a daughter. He lost both. Same month. Jonas's jaw tensed. He won't tell you. He'll carry it until it kills him. Mara looked away, heart sinking. They caught up with Wren near a ridge. He stood near the edge, eyes fixed on the view beyond. Below them, the land sloped down into a wide basin of rock and yellow grass. Fences crisscrossed through snow-dusted fields. Smoke curled from 2 stone chimneys. A cluster of outbuildings stood near a large barn, and a low house painted a dull red. There it is, Wren said. Blackwill. Mara followed his gaze. Her breath caught. It looked nothing like the hollow. No steeple. No children playing. Just hard land and a harder life. Still, it was something. Evan stirred. Is that where we're going? Yes. Mara said quietly. That's where we start over. Wren turned. We rest here a few minutes, then go down. When we ride in, let me talk. Jonas chuckled. That's a first. Wren ignored him. Cordelia doesn't like surprise guests. Or pity. Mara nodded. What should I say to her, the truth? Wren said. But don't beg. She respects people who keep their spine. They drank water from their canteens, ate a few bites of jerky. Then wordlessly they mounted again and began the descent into the basin. As they approached the ranch, movement stirred from the barn. A figure stepped into the open, tall, rigid, with a rifle resting against one hip. Her coat was black, lined with fur. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked carved from stone. Even from a distance, Mara could feel the weight of her eyes. That's Cordelia Blackwill, Wren said under his breath. Try not to blink too slow. She'll think you're soft. They rode up to the front of the barn and stopped. Cordelia raised the rifle slightly, not aiming, just reminding them it was there. Wren, she said. Her voice was deep and rough. Thought you were dead. Not yet, he answered. Pity. Her eyes drifted to Mara, then to the children. And what's all this? A mother Wren said, dismounting. 2 kids, lost her husband, looking for work. Cordelia looked Mara up and down. She clean, yes. Strong, yes. Quiet, Mara answered this time. I can be. Cordelia narrowed her eyes. I don't run a charity. I run a ranch. I've got fences need fixing, mouths need feeding, and men who whine more than they work. I don't need another body unless it earns its place. I'll earn it, Mara said firmly. Cordelia raised an eyebrow. You sure? Mara met her stare. I didn't walk through a storm and bury half my life just to beg. I can cook, clean, haul, and sew. And I know how to survive. Cordelia studied her for a beat, then looked to Wren. You putting your name on her? Wren didn't answer right away. Then, yes. Cordelia gave a short nod. Fine. She's in the bunkhouse. She works like the rest. No excuses. The kids can stay if they don't get in the way. She turned and walked toward the barn rifle slung over her shoulder. Jonas muttered, Well, that went better than expected. Wren turned to Mara. You're in. Mara exhaled. Thank you. I didn't do it for thanks. She gave him a faint smile. You never do. They unpacked. Mara and the children were shown to a room in the back of the bunkhouse, bare walls, 2 cots, a cracked stove. But it was warm, and it was theirs. That night, Evan fell asleep fast, curled beneath the thickest blanket they'd been given. Nell crawled into bed beside Mara, her little hand resting on her mother's arm. Outside, the wind picked up again. This time it didn't sound cruel, just distant. Mara lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking of Cordelia's eyes. Strong, unforgiving, but not without reason. This place wasn't safety. It was a chance, and that was more than she'd had in a long time. The morning came with no ceremony, just a pale blue light sliding through the cracks in the bunkhouse window and the distant clang of metal against metal. Somewhere outside, cattle bellowed. A rooster called once, then stopped like it had thought better of it. Mara sat up slowly, joints stiff, her back sore from the thin mattress. Nell was still asleep, tucked into her side like a warm thought. Evan sat on the edge of his cot, pulling on boots too big for him, lips chapped, eyes already tired. You don't have to come with me today, Mara said gently. I know, he mumbled, but I want to. There was a knock, and the door opened without waiting for an answer. Cordelia Blackwell filled the doorway like she owned every inch of it. Her coat was gone now, replaced by a brown work shirt and dark trousers tucked into weather-worn boots. Her hair was still pulled back tight, and her face looked like it had never once relaxed. Quinn, she said. Kitchen, 10 minutes ago. Yes, ma'am, Mara said, standing fast. Cordelia glanced at the children. The boy can come. If he gets in the way, he'll find out what cold water and a bucket feel like. She left as quickly as she'd come. Evan grinned. She reminds me of Mrs. Helms from school. Mara arched a brow. Mrs. Helms didn't carry a shotgun in the pantry. They dressed quickly, layering against the morning chill. Outside, frost clung to every fence post. The ranch bustled with quiet purpose. Men saddled horses. Women carried buckets from the well. A boy no older than Evan threw hay into the back of a cart. No one smiled. The kitchen sat in a low building off the main house. Inside, heat poured from the stove and the scent of flour and grease filled the air. You know how to cook, a woman barked. She was squat, red-faced, with arms like milk jugs and a smear of soot across her apron. I can manage, Mara said. Good. You wash, chop, stir, carry, and stay out of my way. Mara nodded and got to work. The rhythm was brutal but honest. There was no cruelty in the work, only the kind of sharp-tongued discipline that came from years of doing everything yourself. Evan helped where he could, mostly peeling potatoes or hauling buckets. He didn't complain. That was enough. When the morning rush was over, Mara found a moment near the back door to breathe. She stepped outside, letting the cold sting her face, grateful for the silence. That's when she saw Ren. He was by the corral, sleeves rolled, muscles taut, as he repaired a broken section of rail. A group of ranch hands watched from a distance, not helping, just watching. Jonas approached, saddlebags in hand. "Morning, Red," he said, nodding at her. "Morning," Mara replied. "You riding out?" "Yeah. Cordelia wants someone to check the northern fence line. Last storm knocked down a section." He followed her gaze. "Noticed how none of them boys lift a finger unless Cordelia's watching," he said, tipping his chin toward the idle hands. "They don't like outsiders, especially not ones like Ren. Because of his past. Because he doesn't kneel to anyone." Ren turned slightly and caught Mara looking. Their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them. Not warmth. Not yet. But something near it. Jonas spoke low. "You trust him yet?" "I'm starting to," Mara said. "Should I not?" Jonas shrugged. "Depends what you're hoping for." He swung into his saddle. "Ren's got one foot in this world, one foot in the grave. Hasn't figured out which direction he wants more." Before she could ask what that meant, he rode off. By midday, Mara's hands were raw from scrubbing, and her arms ached from hauling sacks of flour. Cordelia passed through the kitchen, once nodded without speaking, and left. "Don't get excited," the cook muttered. She nods at the horses, too. That night after supper, Mara walked the children back to the bunkhouse. Evan talked about how he'd seen a lizard under the porch and wanted to catch it tomorrow. Nell asked if they'd stay here forever. "I don't know," Mara answered honestly. She tucked them in and stepped outside, needing air. The sky was thick with stars, clear and sharp as cut glass. The cold bit through her sleeves, but she didn't care. Ren stood near the fence again, staring out into the darkness, like he expected something to come crawling through it. She walked over. "They're settling in," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "That's good. You working too hard?" "Better than thinking too hard." Silence stretched. Then Mara asked, "Why do they watch you like that, the ranch hands?" He was quiet. "Then, because they don't know me. And men who don't know you make up stories. Any of them true, some." "Enough." She waited, but he didn't say more, so she nodded. "I owe you more than I can say." "You don't owe me anything." "I do." He turned now, eyes dark in the starlight. "If you feel like you owe me, then you'll feel like you can't walk away. And if there's one thing you should always keep, it's the right to walk away." Mara swallowed. "I'm not walking away. Not now. But one day." She wanted to ask what he meant, but just then a scream cut through the night. Not human. Not quite. From the far pasture. Ren was already moving. He grabbed his rifle from beside the barn. Mara followed without thinking. They ran through the cold, past the stables toward the back pasture. Another scream. Higher pitched this time. A bellow. A lantern flickered ahead. One of the hands stood near the fence, white-faced. "Something hit the stock," he stammered. "God, it just tore through 'em." They reached the fence. 3 cattle lay in the snow, 2 gutted clean, 1 still twitching. Ren crouched beside them, inspecting. These weren't wolves. Mara's stomach turned. "Then what?" He looked up. A man with a knife. Or a message. The other hand stepped back. Why would someone do this? Ren stood slowly. To say they know we're here. Mara felt the cold reach deeper now into something bone deep. Back at the bunkhouse, she sat beside Evan's bed, brushing hair from his forehead. Pa Ren said he'd teach me to ride tomorrow, Evan mumbled sleepily. Did he? She asked, surprised. Yeah. Said I gotta ride like a fox, not a man. She smiled faintly, heart aching. Outside, Ren stood alone at the fence again, rifle in hand, watching the dark. The cattle were buried before sunrise. Ren Jonas and two of the younger ranch hands hauled the torn carcasses down to the dry gulch past the north fence line. Cordelia didn't say much about it, but the thin press of her lips all morning told the rest. Mara heard her mutter once to Jonas first, the mission. Now this. Something circling. Ren said little that day. He worked harder than the others as if sweat could drown out thought. He fixed a broken hinge on the grain shed, chopped wood with violent precision, and hauled water for the bunkhouse before anyone asked. But his eyes, when they paused, looked past the fence lines into the trees, like they were waiting for a shadow to step out. That evening, after the children had eaten and gone to sleep, Mara sat at the edge of the bunkhouse porch. Her legs ached, hands blistered, but she couldn't rest. Ren passed by on his way toward the barn. She stood. Ren. He stopped. I need you to be honest with me. His shoulders tensed. About what? What did you mean last night when you said this was a message? He turned slowly, eyes unreadable in the moonlight. I meant someone's letting us know they're close. But why us? Why this place? He hesitated. Might not be about you. Or the ranch. Then it's about you. He didn't answer. Mara stepped closer. If there's something you're not saying, if you brought danger here, we deserve to know. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked away. I didn't bring danger here, he said quietly. But it may have followed me anyway. Mara's chest tightened. You need to tell me the truth. All of it. He shook his head. You think the truth will help you sleep or just make it worse? I'm not afraid of it. He gave a bitter smile. Everyone says that until they hear it. He started to walk away, but Mara stepped in front of him. Ren, please. He met her eyes, and something broke loose. I used to wear blue, he said. Union Army, cavalry scout. That was before the war turned me into something worse than a soldier. Mara didn't move. We were sent into territories to clear the paths. Clear meant burn homes, drive out tribes, dig holes where no one could scream loud enough to matter. I followed orders until I couldn't, until I turned my rifle the other way. He looked down, hands twitching at his sides. They called it treason, desertion. Said I'd betrayed my uniform. Maybe I did. But I stopped killing for men who gave medals to cowards and orders to devils. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. And your family, they paid for it. His jaw clenched. Men came while I was gone, burned our house, took my wife and daughter, said it was justice, said I'd brought shame and blood. Mara felt the weight of it sink in. I found them 3 days later, what was left of them. He paused, letting the silence do what words couldn't. After that, I stopped being Isaac Fletcher, started walking the mountains, built a name no one knew, a name no one could use against me. She swallowed. That's why you don't tell people who you are. He nodded once. Because what's left of that man isn't worth remembering. the cold wrapped around them sharp as flint. Mara stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. You saved us. You carried Evan through snow that would have killed him. You didn't owe us anything. And you didn't walk away. Ren looked at her, something fraying behind his stare. Don't make me into more than I am, he said. You start trusting the shell of a man, and you'll forget what's broken underneath. She didn't move. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be here. With us. For real. He looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once sharp and walked off into the barn. Inside the bunkhouse, Mara sat beside Evan's bed and tried to steady her heart. The truth was ugly, but it was real, and real things didn't break as easy. The next morning, the tension had a new weight. Whispers passed among the hands. Someone said they saw tracks leading from the east woods. Another claimed a lantern had flickered after midnight just outside the perimeter. Cordelia didn't entertain the rumors. She handed out tools and orders as usual, but her rifle leaned against the porch post all day where everyone could see it. After breakfast, Ren took Evan out behind the corral. Time you learned to sit a saddle proper, he said. Jonas leaned against the fence, chewing a twig. Don't drop him. I'll try not to, Ren muttered. Mara watched from the bunkhouse steps, arms crossed. You ever think he's trying to replace someone? Cordelia asked suddenly beside her. Mara turned. What Cordelia's gaze was fixed on Ren and Evan. Men like him carry ghosts like saddlebags. They never put them down. They just keep walking. I don't think he's replacing, Mara said. I think he's remembering. Cordelia's eyes flicked to her. Just be careful. Even the best men get mean when memory's all they've got left. Mara didn't answer. She turned back to the field. Later that afternoon, the cook sent Mara to the root cellar to fetch onions. She grabbed a lantern and headed around the side of the house. The hatch sat low and dark, half buried in dirt. She opened it, climbed down the short ladder, and pulled the lantern high. She didn't hear the door close behind her until it slammed. Then a voice. Smooth, low, coiled like a snake. Well now, didn't think I'd find her this easy. Mara spun lantern raised. A man stood at the top of the ladder, silhouetted by sunlight. She couldn't see his face, but she knew that voice. She hadn't heard it in over a year, but she remembered. Clay Merritt. He'd worked the mines with Thomas. Then he'd disappeared when things got rough, when the town lost its sheriff, when the law went quiet. She stepped back, heart racing. Clay. Missed me, he chuckled. What do you want? He started down the ladder slowly, grin wide. Just wanted to see how the widow was surviving. Heard you walked out of a storm with a mountain man and 2 sick kids. Quite the story. Mara raised the lantern higher. You need to leave. I will. But not before we talk about something important. His eyes glinted. That man you're traveling with. He's got a bounty higher than any gold I've seen in my life. Dead or alive? Her throat closed. I figure you hand him over nice and quiet. I make enough to disappear for good. You and the little ones get to keep breathing. Fair trade, right? He grinned. Don't answer now. Just think it over. 'Cause others are coming too. And not all of them are going to be polite. He turned, climbed the ladder, and vanished into the light. Mara stood frozen in the cold, dark, heart pounding. Outside, the wind had started again. Mara didn't tell Ren that night. She should have. Every part of her screamed to speak the truth, to spit Clay's name out like the venom it was. But as she sat by the bunkhouse stove watching Ren show Evan how to tie a proper square knot, she couldn't make the words move past her throat. Because Ren looked calm. Not happy, never that. But there was a softness in his voice she hadn't heard before, something patient. Evan sat cross-legged, mimicking the knot with shaky hands, and Ren corrected him without sharpness. Nell leaned on Mara's side, half asleep, her head tucked under her arm. For a moment, the world was quiet. Mara stared into the fire and heard Clay's voice again. You hand him over nice and quiet, or others will come who won't be polite. She clenched her fists, heart pounding. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was selfishness. Maybe it was something older, something like exhaustion. Like the last thing she could bear right now was breaking what little peace they had. So she stayed quiet. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every crack of wind against the window made her flinch. Every flicker of shadow beneath the door made her breath catch. She lay beside Nell and stared at the ceiling until morning came. In the kitchen the next day, she burned a batch of biscuits and nearly sliced her thumb peeling turnips. The cook noticed, but said nothing. Mara knew better than to expect second chances. When she stepped out for air, she found Jonas by the well, wiping grease from a bridle. You look like someone just buried a truth too big for one grave, he said, without looking at her. She froze. I didn't say anything, she replied. Didn't have to. You carry secrets like a limp. She hesitated, then stepped closer. If a man showed up here who wasn't supposed to, who meant harm, what would Cordelia do? Jonas glanced at her. Cordelia shoots problems before they become warnings. Why no reason? Mara said too quickly. Jonas raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Well, if you ever feel like trusting somebody, I'd rather you speak before the fire starts. That afternoon, Ren asked Mara to help him mend a section of the barn roof. She followed him up the ladder, working side by side in the brittle wind, hands numb from cold and fear alike. Something's off with you, Ren said after a long silence. She didn't look at him. I didn't sleep well. Is that it? She paused, hammer halfway to the nail. I'm not used to feeling safe, she whispered. It makes me nervous. Ren gave a low chuckle. Safety's a feeling people mistake for silence. Doesn't mean something isn't sneaking up behind you. She nodded, eyes on the sky. Exactly. He looked at her for a long second, then passed her another nail. Well, if something's sneaking up, I'll hear it first. That night it came. Just after moonrise. 3 riders. No sound, but hooves over frost. No torches. No calls. Ren was the first to notice. He didn't sleep much, and when he heard the soft crunch of earth outside the corral, he grabbed his rifle and stepped out into the yard. Jonas was already there, knife in one hand, boots half-laced. The riders didn't approach the house. They lingered just beyond the outer fence line, watching. Ren called out. State your business. No answer. Then a voice, calm, mocking. Just admiring the livestock. Heard this place had a few rare breeds. Ren stepped forward. You're not welcome here. I don't recall asking. A beat. Then we're looking for someone. A deserter. Isaac Fletcher. Maybe you've heard of him. Mara's blood turned cold. Jonas stiffened beside Ren. He's not here, Jonas called. Oh, we think he is. And we think he's hiding behind fences and women like a yellow-bellied mutt. Ren didn't move. His voice came like gravel. You've got one chance to leave. After that, I stop offering." The man laughed. "Big talk from a ghost." Ren raised the rifle. "Go." They did, but they didn't hurry. They turned their horses slow like they wanted everyone to see their backs and know they'd be back. The next morning, Cordelia called a meeting in the barn. Ren stood with arms crossed, silent. Jonas leaned against a stall, watching the hands shift nervously. Cordelia's voice cut the air like a blade. "This ranch is now on alert. No one rides alone. Night shifts are doubled. I want eyes on the tree line every hour." A young hand named Jeb raised his voice. "Who were those men, bounty hunters?" Cordelia said flatly. "And worse." "They want Ren," another muttered. Ren didn't deny it. Cordelia looked at him. "You brought this here." "I tried not to. Trying don't always count." Mara stepped forward. "He saved us. If not for Ren, my children wouldn't be alive." Cordelia's eyes turned to her. "Then maybe he should have kept going after." "No," Mara said firmly. "This isn't his fault. These men hunt weakness. That's what they're hoping to find." Cordelia studied her, then nodded once. "Then we don't show them any." She turned to the crowd. "You got families here. Land. Work. This isn't just about one man. It's about every damn one of us. If they push, we push back." The meeting broke. The hands went back to work, slower, more watchful. Mara found Ren outside near the woodshed. "You okay?" she asked. "I expected this," he said. "I just didn't think it would feel like my fault again." "It's not," she said. Then she looked down. "There's something I didn't tell you." His head turned sharply. "A man. Clay Merritt. He was here. In the cellar. Said he knew who you were. Said others were coming." Ren's jaw clenched. "When 2 nights ago?" He stared at her. "I should have told you. I was scared of me, of losing what we have here." His voice softened. "You can't protect people by hiding danger from them. That's how it finds you." She nodded, guilt heavy in her throat. He stepped forward, hand brushing her shoulder. "Next time you tell me. No matter what." "I will." The wind picked up again. Sharp, cold, like teeth brushing skin. They both looked out at the trees. Ren whispered more to himself than her. "This time I won't run. Not again. Let 'em come." By dawn, the fences were reinforced, the rifles cleaned, and the air had changed. The ranch was no longer just a patch of land between mountains. It had become a fort, a line drawn in the dirt. Everyone felt it, the silence in the fields, the way the cattle didn't wander far from the barn, the way even the wind seemed to move slower, heavier. Jonas hadn't come back from his scouting run yet, which worried Cordelia more than she let on. She paced the porch, chewing her cheek raw. Her rifle was never more than a step away. Ren stood near the corral, watching the tree line jaw tight. Mara brought him coffee in a tin cup, hands trembling more from fear than the cold. "They'll come today," he said, eyes never leaving the horizon. Mara nodded. "How many? 3, maybe 4. Clay'll have found others hungry enough to sell their gun. Men like him don't work alone when there's easy blood." She sat beside him on the hay bale. "What happens if we win?" He looked at her for a long moment. "We don't win. Not really. We survive. That's different." Before she could respond, a sharp whistle rang out from the ridge. A ranch hand, the one Jonas trained for lookout duty. Ren was already moving rifle slung, strides long and fast. Mara followed, heart pounding. Cordelia met them halfway up the ridge. Riders. 3. Closing fast. They reached the overlook just as the shapes came into view. 3 men on horseback, dark coats, wide hats, rifles strapped across their saddles like they were out for a fox hunt. One of them, Clay, rode slightly ahead, the smirk on his face visible even from a distance. "Don't shoot until I say," Cordelia said. "Let's see what they want." As the riders approached the outer gate, Clay called up, voice smug. "Morning, Hope, we're not interrupting breakfast." Ren stepped forward. "You've had your warning." "I have," Clay said, tipping his hat. "But my friends here, they're new to all this. See, they heard rumor you were harboring a traitor. A man with a price on his head big enough to buy his own county." Cordelia stepped into view, rifle aimed. "This is private land. Next word you say better be goodbye." Clay smiled like it was a poker game. "We're not here for trouble, Miss Blackwell. Just a trade. The man we want for a safe walk away." "That's fair. You think we trade people like cattle?" Cordelia snapped. "Try another gate." Behind her, Mara moved closer to Ren. "Do you know the others?" Ren shook his head. "But I know their type." One of Clay's men leaned forward. "You don't give him up, we burn this place down. Man, woman, kid, it won't matter." Cordelia raised her rifle, slow and deliberate. "Then take your shot or turn your horses. Because the second you cross that fence, this turns into something none of you walk away from." For a second, the air froze. Clay glanced at Ren, then at Mara, and his grin faltered just slightly. "I see," he said. "You're the kind of folks that need convincing." Then he turned his horse and rode off. Not a retreat, a promise. As the hooves faded into the trees, Cordelia turned to the group. "They'll be back, darker, meaner, and maybe with more." She looked at Ren. "You still think this fight's just about you?" Ren didn't answer. He stared at the fence. Cordelia spat. "You better decide quick. Because if I go down defending this land, I damn well want to know what for." That night the ranch didn't sleep. Barricades were built. Lanterns lit and placed high to illuminate every angle. Shotguns sat beside every door. The cook handed out knives like they were biscuits. Mara stayed close to the children, but her ears never stopped straining for footsteps that didn't belong. Ren didn't come inside. She found him by the barn again, sitting on a hay bale rifle laid across his lap, staring into the dark like it owed him something. "You still think this is your burden alone?" she asked. He didn't look at her. "It started with me." "But it doesn't end with you," she said, voice firm. "You gave us a chance. You carried us through cold, through storms, through hunger. You don't get to pick when you're part of something." He didn't speak. She crouched in front of him, took the rifle from his lap, and set it aside. "You once told me to never forget I can walk away," she said. "But I'm not. I'm standing right here. With you. So stop pretending you're still alone." His eyes found hers, and something cracked there. Not weakness, relief. Like the weight had shifted just enough to make it bearable. "I spent so long running I forgot what standing still felt like," he whispered. Then he stood, picked up the rifle, and looked to the trees. No more running. Not tonight. At first light, a rider appeared on the far ridge. Jonas. His coat was torn blood at his shoulder, but he stayed upright in the saddle. Mara ran out. As he collapsed, Ren catching him before he hit the ground. "They're coming," Jonas rasped. 6. Maybe more. Armed like they mean it. Cordelia was at his side, instantly barking orders. "Get him inside, saddle the horses, put the kids in the cellar. This is it. Ren helped Jonas to the porch, then turned to Mara. "You and the kids." "We're staying," she cut in. "No," he said. If it goes bad, I want them to see their mother wasn't afraid." He stared at her. "They'll remember you stood," he whispered. "Then let's make it count," she replied. From the tree line, the sound of hooves began again. Not slow, not cautious. This time they weren't scouting. This time they were coming to finish it. Ren moved beside Cordelia, rifle raised. She looked at him, expression hard but honest. "You ready?" He nodded. "They want a ghost. Let's show them what a mountain man really looks like." The first shot split the morning like a scream. It came from the ridge, sharp, deliberate, and in its wake followed the thunder of hooves and the roar of men who weren't hiding anymore. They came fast. 6 riders. Faces wrapped in scarves, rifles up, fire in their eyes, and blood already promised. Ren didn't hesitate. He shouted positions, and the ranch moved like a body with one mind. Cordelia was already on the porch, rifle locked to her shoulder. Jonas, pale but upright, leaned out from behind the corral post, shotgun in hand. Ranch hands scrambled to the barricades behind hay bales, barrels, stacked lumber. Mara rushed the children into the cellar, Nell clutching her arm, Evan looking back with eyes too wide for his age. "Stay down," she told them, voice like steel despite the tremble in her hands. "Don't come out until I say." She bolted the door behind her, then turned and ran toward the barn where Ren stood waiting, eyes fixed on the horizon, like he could bend it with his will. "They've spread out," he muttered, "trying to flank both sides. Then we hold the middle." Cordelia snapped. "Force them through the open. Make them bleed for every inch." The first rider breached the outer fence. Jonas dropped him with a clean shot to the chest. The man crumpled. His horse screamed and bolted into the trees. The second one fired back, bullet clipping the barn wall inches from Mara's head. She ducked, heart hammering. Ren raised his rifle, took one breath, squeezed the trigger. Another man fell. But the others didn't stop. 2 more came through the east side, weaving between trees, using shadows like allies. One jumped the low fence and disappeared behind the bunkhouse. "They're in," someone yelled. Chaos cracked open. Ren turned to Mara, shouting over the roar. "Get to the bunkhouse, protect the kids." She ran, boots pounding the dirt, lungs burning. As she rounded the back of the bunkhouse, she saw him. Clay Merritt. Face twisted in a grin. Rifle in one hand. A lit torch in the other. "You're too late," he called. He threw the torch onto the woodpile stacked against the kitchen wall. Flames leapt like they'd been waiting for breath. No, Mara shouted. She tackled him. They hit the ground hard. His rifle clattered away. She clawed at his face, fought like every second was fire in her veins. He grunted, rolled her under him. "You should have stayed hidden, sweetheart," he hissed. "Could have lived nice and quiet." She spit blood in his face. "I did quiet. Now I do survival." She jammed her knee up hard, and he gasped. She rolled, grabbed a piece of broken wood from the ground, and slammed it across his face. He went down. Behind her, the fire grew. Ren came barreling around the corner, gun raised, but stopped when he saw her standing over Clay, chest heaving. "You all right?" he barked. She nodded, breathless. He tried to burn the bunkhouse. Ren grabbed Clay by the collar and dragged him across the dirt. "Get water," he shouted. Mara grabbed a bucket from beside the well. Ranch hands joined, forming a line. Water flew. Smoke choked the air. Minutes felt like hours, but they beat the fire down. When it was done, the side of the kitchen was scorched black, but the walls still stood. Clay groaned in the dirt, nose broken, lip split. Cordelia marched over, shotgun in hand. He's the one, Wren nodded. Leader, mouthpiece, coward. She raised the shotgun. No, Mara said, stepping between them. Not yet. Cordelia stared her down. You want him alive, I want him to see us rebuild, to see we didn't break. Cordelia lowered the gun. That's a better punishment anyway. Elsewhere on the ranch, the last of the intruders were dealt with. One bled out in the stable. Another surrendered after being cornered by Jonas and a pitchfork-wielding ranch hand named Bio. When the dust settled, 4 of the 6 attackers were dead. 1 captured. 1 gone, vanished into the trees, wounded, but not forgotten. Mara stood beside Wren, looking over the broken fence, the burned siding, the blood in the dirt. We held, she whispered. For now, he said. Cordelia walked up beside them, eyes cold but proud. You fought like someone who's done it before, she said to Wren. He didn't respond. You stayin', she asked. He looked to Mara. Mara met his gaze. You don't owe us anything. That's not true, he said softly. Cordelia nodded once. If you stay, you work like the rest. But you're not just a hand anymore. This place is yours too now if you want it. Wren didn't answer right away. Then I want it. That night, the ranch fell quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet. It was a deeper stillness. One earned. Mara tucked Nell in, kissed her forehead, and sat beside Evan, who stared at the ceiling. Are they gone? He asked. They're not coming back, she said. Not here. Not while we're standing. He blinked. Ma. Yeah. He smiled faintly. You looked like Pa today. Her throat caught. She brushed his hair gently. No, love. I looked like me. Outside, Wren sat on the porch steps, the rifle beside him. He didn't grip it like a shield anymore, just let it rest. Mara stepped out and sat beside him. He stared at the stars. You ever think peace is just a quiet before the next storm? He asked. She leaned into him. Maybe. But I'll take it. Quiet is still quiet. He nodded. You did good today. So did you. They sat there shoulder to shoulder, 2 people who had once run from everything, now still. He exhaled. I buried Isaac Fletcher a long time ago. Thought it made me free. She looked at him. And now he turned to her. Now I think I need to dig him back up. The frost lingered longer than usual that morning. It clung to the porch rails, curled around the fence posts, and refused to melt even when the sun climbed high. The kind of cold that didn't bite it settled, quiet, unassuming, just like the unease that now sat in Wren's chest. He hadn't slept. Not really. Not since the fire. Not since Clay had looked him in the eye and called him by a name he thought he'd buried in blood and snow. Isaac Fletcher. It had taken years to stop hearing that name as a sentence, even longer to stop flinching at it. Now it echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. Inside the barn, Wren checked the tack for the 4th time. There wasn't much left to fix. His hands moved anyway, just to keep from being still. Jonas limped and shoulder-bandaged but healing. He watched Wren for a minute before speaking. You fixin' to run again? He asked. Wren didn't look up. No. Jonas raised a brow. Could have fooled me. I'm thinking, Wren muttered. That's worse, Jonas grinned. Thinking gets you into more trouble than running ever did. Wren set the saddle down and wiped his hands. Back in the war, he said slowly. They gave us numbers. For records, for orders, for death. Jonas leaned on the stall rail, listening. I stopped being Isaac Fletcher the moment they made me 471B, and I thought if I burned that name, I could burn the rest with it. The killing, the guilt, the cowardice. Did it work? No, Ren said, voice flat. It just made me a ghost with a gun. Jonas studied him. Well, ghost or not, you kept us alive last week, and ghosts don't bleed far as I know. Ren gave a dry smile. Mara appeared in the doorway, then hands tucked into her coat sleeves. You coming? She asked. Ren blinked. Coming where to, town? Cordelia's sending a supply wagon. Says she trusts you more than the boys with a shopping list. He hesitated. It's been a long time since I rode into a town that didn't want me dead. She met his eyes. Then maybe it's time you see what it's like to ride into one where you're needed. Jonas tossed him a pair of gloves. Besides, you still owe me a bottle of good whiskey. Ren sighed and nodded. Fine. Let's get it over with. They rode out at mid-morning. Ren, Mara, and one of the ranch hands named Ellis who drove the wagon. The road to town curled through the low hills, pine trees lining the way like sentinels. As they rode, Ren kept his hat low, eyes scanning the horizon. You know, Mara said casually, for someone so worried about being seen, you sure saved a lot of people loudly. Quiet heroism doesn't leave bullet holes, he muttered. She smiled. No, but neither does silence. They reached the town of Bristle Hollow by midday. It hadn't changed much, wooden storefronts, a single main street dust that never fully settled. A church bell rang somewhere in the distance, and the saloon doors creaked even without a breeze. Ren dismounted slowly, boots hitting the ground with the weight of memory. A few townsfolk looked up. One old man squinted hard at Ren, then went back to sweeping. Relax, Mara said, looping her arm through his. They don't know you. And if they do, they don't care. You're with me. He wanted to believe that. They hit the general store first. Ellis handled the inventory. Ren stood near the entrance, watching the street. That's when a voice spoke behind him, gruff, curious, not unfriendly. Well, I'll be Isaac Fletcher. Ren turned slowly. A man stood there, older than him. Mustache graying, badge dull but visible on his vest. Sheriff Rowley, Ren said stiffly. The sheriff nodded once. Didn't think I'd see your face again. I didn't plan on it. They stared at each other. You here to stir up ghosts or bury 'em? The sheriff asked. Ren tilted his head. Not sure yet. Mara stepped between them, cool and calm. We're here for supplies, that's all. Rowley looked her over, then back to Ren. I remember hearing about what you did. Thought they were just stories. Man walks away from command. Turns his back on blood orders. Ren shrugged. I didn't walk away. I got dragged. Well, Rowley said after a pause, you keep your head down. This town's quieter than it used to be. We aim to keep it that way. He tipped his hat and walked off. Mara exhaled. That wasn't so bad. No, Ren said. But the past doesn't knock, it kicks the door in. They finished the shopping, loaded the wagon, and started back. Halfway through the hills, Ren slowed his horse. Stop the wagon, he said. Ellis pulled the reins. Problem, Ren slid off his saddle, crouched and pointed. Tracks, fresh, boot prints, 3 men. Following us, maybe trailing since town. Mara's expression hardened. Clay's back up, maybe. Or someone else trying to collect on what's left of my name. He stood scanning the trees. We're not walking into another ambush. Ellis looked nervous. You want me to ride ahead? No. You stay with the wagon. Keep moving. Mara and I will cut through the ridge and see if we can circle behind." They tied their horses off and climbed the hill on foot, rifles ready. The wind up top was colder. They moved slow, careful. Half a mile in, they saw them 3 men crouched in the brush, watching the road below. One had a long-range rifle. Another was chewing tobacco lazy. The third had a poster. A wanted poster. Ren's name on it. Mara took one look and whispered, "We take them," No, Ren said. "We scare them." He stood tall, rifle aimed, voice cutting sharp through the trees. "Drop the paper and run." The men spun, startled. One drew his weapon, but Mara fired into the dirt near his feet. The others took off, crashing through the underbrush like hunted deer. Ren walked forward, picked up the poster. It was old, faded, but still legible. "Wanted Isaac Fletcher, alive or dead, $5,000. Mara stepped beside him. "You're worth more than this paper." He didn't smile. "I buried this man," he said, "but the world won't let me forget him." She looked at him. "Then don't forget. Just don't let it define you." As they walked back toward the wagon, he whispered more to himself than her, "I ain't a ghost no more. I'm the man who survived him." The ranch looked different when they returned. It wasn't the fence repairs, the blackened patch on the bunkhouse wall, or even the added guards near the gate. It was something harder to name. A quietness that wasn't fear, but readiness. The kind of stillness you only earned after fire, after blood, after winning a fight you didn't ask for. Ren noticed it the moment his boots hit the dirt again. Cordelia stood waiting by the barn, arms crossed, face unreadable. Jonas leaned against the rail nearby, one hand on the grip of his revolver, the other cradling a half-burnt cigarette. "Welcome back," Cordelia said. "I assume you didn't die." "Not for lack of trying," Ren replied, handing her a sack of supplies. She nodded at Mara. "He give you any trouble?" "Only in his head," Mara said. Jonas flicked ash to the ground. "You get followed." Ren's eyes flicked toward the tree line. "We shook 'em, but there's whispers out there. My name's making rounds again." Cordelia exhaled slow, like someone loading a second barrel. "Then we need to prepare. Again." That night, after the sun slipped behind the hills, Ren sat by the fire with Mara and the kids. Nell had fallen asleep with her head on his lap. Evan was dozing beside her, clinging to a wood-carved horse Jonas had whittled the week before. Mara watched Ren with quiet eyes. "You've changed," she said. He didn't look at her. "Not enough." "You talk now. You look people in the eye." "I still wake up reaching for a gun." She nodded. "Yeah. But now you put it down." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't heavy, just honest. Then hoofbeats. Fast. Urgent. Ren stood instantly, laying Nell down gently. A rider galloped into the yard. A young woman, dust-streaked coat torn at the shoulder. She didn't slow until her horse nearly collapsed under her. Ren caught the reins, steadying her. The rider looked straight at him. "Are you Isaac Fletcher?" He stiffened. "Who's asking?" She dismounted, breath heaving. "Name's Dinah Crow. I rode from the Black Ridge settlement. They sent me because we're under siege. Raiders. Bounty hunters. Same kind that came for you. Only this time they're burning everything." Ren's jaw clenched. "Why come to me? Because they're using your name. They're saying they're hunting for you, and anyone who helps you is fair game. That's their excuse to take land. To kill." She stepped closer, eyes fierce. "You started something when you stood and fought. People saw that. Now you have a choice: disappear again, or finish what you began. Mara stepped forward, voice low but steady. You don't owe them anything. Ren looked from her to Dinah. I don't owe them, he said quietly. But I owe the part of me that watched my family burn while I ran. I owe the men I left to die under orders I knew were wrong. I owe the name I buried in shame. He turned to Cordelia, who had appeared silently at the edge of the porch. You got horses to spare? She nodded slowly. 3, maybe 4 if Jonas rides double. Ren looked back at Dinah. Then we ride at first light. Mara followed him into the barn later. Arms folded, worry wrapped in every breath. You sure? No, Ren said, strapping his saddle tight. But I can't keep hiding behind borrowed names and half-built fences. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to come back. He looked at her. I will. Promise. He hesitated, then said softly. No. But I'll try. She stepped forward, resting her hand on his chest. That's more than I ever got from Thomas. He froze at the name. She hadn't said it in weeks. Mara pulled back, smiling faintly. Funny, isn't it? I spent 2 years grieving a man I couldn't save. Now I'm afraid of losing one I didn't expect. He reached up, took her hand, and pressed it to his cheek. I buried Isaac Fletcher in the snow, but tonight... His voice cracked just enough to be human. Tonight I need to carry him into the fire. She leaned in, kissed his temple. Then do it. But come back carrying more than his ghost. That night Ren didn't sleep. He stood by the fence line watching the moon shift behind clouds. He thought about the man he'd been, the boy who followed orders, the husband who returned too late, the stranger who drifted through towns like wind through pines. He thought about the boy with the square jaw and quick temper who'd once believed that uniforms made men. That justice was a line you could follow like a map. He wasn't that boy anymore. He was something forged, something earned. Just before sunrise, he walked into the barn and found Jonas already saddling a horse. Didn't think you'd let me ride, Jonas muttered. I need someone to keep me honest. You're choosing a crippled drunk. For that, I'm choosing the man who stood when others didn't. Jonas smirked. Hell, maybe you did change. Cordelia approached with a wrapped bundle hardtack jerky bullets. Can't stop you, she said, handing it over. But if you die out there, I'm naming a goat after you and telling everyone it was a coward. Ren chuckled. That's fair. She looked him in the eye. You come back. Or don't come back at all. But don't leave us wondering. He nodded. Mara stepped forward, then wrapped Nell's scarf around his neck. For luck, she said. Ren touched her cheek. For home. As the horses gathered, Dinah mounted first, then Jonas. Ren took one last look at the ranch, the fences, the bunkhouse, the smoke curling from the chimney, the girl with wild hair waving from the steps. Then he turned to the road. Behind him was survival. Ahead of him was justice. He nudged his horse forward and whispered, This time I ride into the fire, with my name on my back, and I ride straight. The sky over Blackridge was burning. Smoke coiled into the morning light, thick and black, rising from the ridge where once there had been a church, a schoolhouse and homes built by hands that had known nothing but hard years and harder land. Now there were only smoldering beams and the howl of grief rolling through the hills. Ren's horse crested the bluff, and the sight hit him like a hammer to the chest. People were scattered, some digging through ash, others tending to wounded laid out on blankets in the field below. A boy no older than Evan limped past him, face streaked with soot, and something older than fear. Jonas rode up beside him, eyes wide. They didn't just raid. They meant to erase it. Dinah pulled up ahead, her jaw set. They came at night. Said anyone who'd ever traded with 3 Pines or housed a stranger would pay. Did they get what they came for? Wren asked. Dinah looked back. They didn't find you. So no. But they found everything else. Wren dismounted. His boots hit scorched earth. The wind carried the sharp scent of burned hay and blood. He passed a man holding his wife's hand, while a doctor packed a wound in her belly. He passed a girl cradling a lamb too small to have survived the blaze. He passed loss layered like smoke, but not a single person begging for rescue. They had already begun rebuilding. "We've got 20 rifles left," Dinah said, walking beside him. 30 if you count the ones that misfire half the time. Less than that in good hands. "Who's leading?" Wren asked. "You are," she said simply. Wren stopped. "You don't know me. We know what you stood for, and what they feared. That's enough." He didn't respond, because deep down he feared they were wrong. But then he saw a boy dragging a half-burned beam from the rubble, alone. No one told him to do it. No one helped. He just did it because someone had to. And Wren realized it wasn't about being worthy. It was about being willing. That night they prepared. They dug trenches, reinforced fences, soaked burlap sacks in the well, and layered them across the roofs of the remaining cabins. Jonas taught a farmer's wife how to load a repeater. Wren taught 2 boys how to lay a trap line. Mara would have been proud of how he spoke clear calm, like a man who believed in more than survival. Like a man building something with his words. The attack came at dawn. 6 riders, then 10. Then a whole company mercenaries, drifters, men with nothing in their eyes but dust and greed. Some wore pieces of old uniforms. One had a tattered Confederate flag tied to his saddle horn like a trophy. They didn't sneak. They wanted to be seen. Wanted fear to do their work for them. Wren stood on the roof of the grain barn, rifle, steady eyes locked. When the first rider crossed the fence line, he fired, and the battle began. It wasn't clean. It wasn't glorious. But it was brave. Men and women who'd never held a gun before shot true because they were aiming for something more than just defense. They were aiming for a future. Jonas went down in the second hour, shoulder torn open, bleeding fast. But he crawled behind the water trough and kept firing with one good hand, shouting curses as if rage alone might hold the line. Wren moved like a man reborn. He led from the front. He shouted orders, pulled wounded to cover, stood where others would have ducked. At one point, a young merc charged the schoolhouse. Wren met him there, face to face. They fought hand to hand, no rifles, no distance, just fists and fury. The man slammed Wren against the wall knife at his throat. Wren twisted, drove his knee up, knocked the knife free. They fell together, and when it was done, only one stood. By sunset, the battle was over. The mercenaries were gone, fled, or dead. The field was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was the kind that came after a storm. Wren limped into the center of town, shirt torn, bloodied, soaked in ash. Dinah met him there, eyes wide with disbelief. "You did it," she whispered. "No," he said, "we did." People gathered slowly like flowers after frost. They looked to him not like a hero, but like something better, like someone who came when it mattered. Later, they buried their dead. 32. Each grave marked with a stone and the kind of silence that only respect could hold. Wren stood by Jonas's grave, hat in hand. The old man hadn't made it, bled out in the stable, still grinning. You were right, Ren said to the dirt. I'm no ghost, just a man trying to be better than yesterday. Dinah came up beside him. What now? Ren looked out across the valley. Smoke still hung in the air, but so did laughter. Children were chasing one another again. Someone had started a fire for cooking, not for war. What now? He repeated. We rebuild. He returned to the ranch a week later. Mara met him at the gate. She didn't run to him. She walked, and he met her halfway. They didn't speak, not at first, just held on long and quiet. When she finally pulled back, she whispered, "Did you find what you went looking for?" He nodded. "I found the truth." She smiled. "And what's that?" He looked at her at the ranch, the children playing by the barn, the sun dipping low over 3 pines. "That you don't bury your past to escape it," he said. "You carry it to build something better." She took his hand. "So what now?" He smiled, soft and tired and whole. Now he said, "We build a life worth the name I carry." They walked back together, hand in hand, and the wind carried no ghosts behind them, only the promise of morning.